Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to a new episode of Social Confoes. I'm your host Diego, together with my co-host Jean-Luc. Jean-Luc, how are we doing today?
Well, it's busy times. Let's call it busy times. After these 2 weeks, I want to go on a break and start in 2025. But that's not for social confos because we have a brand new edition today. Before we jump into that, we should put out some links because, as you may know, this podcast can be viewed by video on YouTube. So on youtube.com/confos. And if you want a little bit more, you can follow us on Instagram at confos or on Substack. If you like reading and you want the update straight in your email inbox, visit us at confos.substack.com and you will get some timely updates. Diego, are you ready to start the show?
Yeah, with that being said, we are excited to have another guest today. And it's last week we talked about social media. It's social media month basically, and we're going into social media conference season. And we have someone who already has quite a bit of experience in that as well. Also, I know him like about what 10, 8 to 10 years maybe now. So it's been quite a while. Um, I think you know him quite longer. So
Yeah.
without further
So
ado,
without further ado, the one, the only Raoul Brahim. Welcome, Raoul. How are you doing?
Welcome, guys. Thank you for inviting me to join the social confoes. I'm really happy to be here and tell a little bit about my story.
yeah, I think this one's been long
So
overdue.
I want to jump in because I had a whole intro plan, but I wanted Raoul to be already be in the
Oh,
in the
God.
recording
Okay.
before when I share. So because so Raoul has a really special place in my heart, right? So he's one of the few friends that I can talk business with, but also talk life with. And he always seems to have like, I wouldn't call it an agenda, but he always makes sure that I should stay on the right path. And then every time when we went out or met somewhere or I went over to his office, I leave there thinking like, yeah, he has some valid points. And then always like 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm like, I know he's right, but I still want to do it different. So that's the kind of relationship that Raul and I have. And I honestly don't exactly recall when we first started hanging out, but I do remember even 10 years ago, um, Raul always being the one to ask me questions to think about choices that I made in life. So, Raul, thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
I think we have the same relationship that I had with my dad. So when I was younger, my dad always told me. So I always asked him for advice for things that we did, and he always told me what is going to happen. And I always told him, but Dad, I need to experience to learn from it. And the most beautiful thing of it was that he always gave me the room to learn from my own mistakes, but he was always right. Not, I'm not saying that I'm always right. I'm not saying that, but
Yeah.
I do recognize it. I mean, I think we learn different, Sean. Look, we learn by experiencing, and that is a great way of learning, I believe. And even if you make mistakes, that are even the best lessons that you have.
Yeah, that's one thing I can also vouch for knowing Raul. From what I know, he always has I won't say fresh perspective or a very neutral, thought out perspective on several topics. And it always makes you think further. And that's something I do admire. And it's not that he takes sides, but he has a very objective, clear way of thinking. And I think um, objectively thinking things through fundamentals and really following through with action. It's something I do recognize. I'd say in both of you as well. But I know Raul actually through a friend of mine, and he was one of the programmers you worked with, Yuri. And that's kind of how we got to know each other. We already knew each other from some hackathons, some IT events, etc. But that's when we really got to know each other further. Uh, there was a period where we experimented with the mining stuff, uh, and then kind of that grew with the social media events, the conferences, the ICT summit, and also social media conference. And over the years, that kind of yeah, I'd say got us more on a not just professional level, but also more on a personal level. You can always sit down and have a great conversation. So in that context, I think we've set the stage for another fun conversation here on Social Convos. Obviously, this time is being recorded, so uh, I'd say let's get into it.
Awesome.
Uh,
So
Thank you for
basically,
the
they're
kind
like
words.
there are a lot of talking points that we could jump into, but let's try at least to do it a little bit chronologically. So you mentioned your dad, and we're not gonna do the whole who's your dad and those kind of things. But what is like one of the things? What's one thing that one major takeaway that your dad always talked, or a tip that he gave you in life that you feel everybody in life should know about?
Ooh, I have so many. It's really difficult to pick one, but the one thing I think I admired the most of him is that he had a really specific way of 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 his ambition and of the way he worked and what he achieved in life, and he achieved really great things. And I was always the troublemaker. So you have the good boy, that was my brother Maurice, always the best, and my sister and my little sister, she had some troubles also, but I was always different. You know, I didn't want to do the easy way. I didn't finish my study, and even though I'm so different from his perspective of what I should do, he never judged it. He always gave his advice and he let me make the mistakes. And he was always there for me when it went wrong. And I think that is the way I like to remember him the most. Um, so a specific lesson, I have had many lessons from him. But for me, in the way I want to raise my children, I think that's the main reason. I want them to know that they can do it their way, and I will be there if it goes wrong.
That being said, you're also a father, teenage boys now, and if you look back at your, yeah, I'd say teenage years, you already mentioned a bit. You had the room, the space to make mistakes, and that's also something you try to uh, instill in your kids now. What are some? What's one thing you see from yourself in them that you see? Oh, that was me, like 20, 30 years ago, 30 years ago. And what's something that you say? Hmm. What's something a different approach? I'd say a Raul approach that you found like, okay, maybe I can try it a bit differently.
Uh, I think this is the most difficult question that you can ask me, because I think I'm a really bad parent, to be honest. Not because I'm human, and everybody who is human makes errors and makes mistakes. And when you're an overthinker, every mistake that you make, you think about 10 times, and that's terrible. So, for me, in the beginning, when my children were younger, I was really busy with feeling like a bad parent. I thought I didn't do things well. I yelled at them, Um, I wasn't nice every time when I tried to help them with the studies, and I couldn't take it anymore, and I walked away and things
Oh,
like
oh,
this.
every parent feels like
Yeah,
that.
I know, but it makes you feel so bad. But then I start to realize that I think everybody has traumas, and you can learn from your traumas. So I teach them other things in that perspective. But I do try to follow what my dad did. I do try to give them all the options that they show interest in, and give them the opportunity to make mistakes. That's what I really want them to know that they can do, and also in the way I'm looking at where they should go and study, or if they want to go and study, I have a totally different approach and way of thinking about it than what the normal people should do, especially from Suriname. Um, so
Could
yeah,
you elaborate a bit on that, on that approach?
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, I haven't done it yet, but this is what I'm thinking about. So in Suriname, it's normal that when somebody finish their studies here, they go abroad right away and they go to mostly the Netherlands or a different country. So we end, I think, in August here, and the school begins in the middle of August, end of August in Holland. So when you're finished with your schools here, you go to the Netherlands. You have 2 weeks to arrange everything. You pay the highest ticket that you can pay because it's around $2,000 for a normal economy ticket. You have 2 weeks. You have to buy everything. You're spending way much more money, and the child comes there without vacation, starts in a different culture, doesn't know what winter is, doesn't know how the Dutch people are. They have been pampered by their parents their whole life, and now they have to do everything on their own. So what you see is that the most students, they fail the first 2 years. They start doing a study, they don't finish it. They are doing what their dad did. They have no clue. So I asked my son, he's 17 now, and he's going to study next year. I asked him, "What do you want to do?" And I heard nothing from him. So a week went by, 2 weeks went by, now a month went by, and I'm starting to get a little bit angry. I'm like, I gave you an assignment, why don't you do it? And his answer is he doesn't know yet. So if you don't know, if you don't have a clear path for you, then I would advise him not to go in August to the Netherlands. I advise him go for a year to the Netherlands, and he has a Dutch passport, so it's much easier for him to go there and to start working. And actually, I want him to work the first year or maybe travel the first year. Let him see the world, and in that year, let him go to some fairs. And if he sees a great study or something that's of interest of him, then we can consider doing the study. Or if he doesn't want to do the study, no problem. The money that I save with the study could be his start for a business or for something else. So I look at it totally different. I don't want any pressure for him in that regard. And I do have to say, I think school is a little bit overrated, to be honest. The way we teach our children is not always the best way, I believe. And if I look at my own perspective, um, I started doing what my dad did. I went and studied economics. And the great thing of my study was that in the first year you had a general year, so you got everything from every study. So you had some commercial economy, you had some ICT, you had some business economics, and I liked ICT, and I started doing that. And I started my first company when I was at school. It's called Faralobi. This was in the end of 1999, beginning of 2000.
the pre-Wikipedia era
Yeah,
for those
yeah,
that are a little bit younger.
yeah. And so like 25 years ago. My God, I'm old. Um, and it was a website where you could order stuff and they would be delivered in Suriname. But instead of sending stuff from Holland to Suriname, we get everything in Suriname at that time. So we would buy them at Joy or something else, and then we would deliver it for people. But a lot of people just like to use Jos Steeman. I don't know if you know what that is, but it was a shipping service in that time. And they would buy a box, send it to Suriname, wait.
Boxes and boxes.
Yes. Wait 2 weeks. Somebody had to go in the line to wait for it. Then things were melted. Everything wasn't great. And we thought we had a better solution. Within 48 hours, you could deliver anything in Suriname for you. But it didn't it didn't go that well. It taught me a lot of lessons. So that's a good experience to have.
If you look at it from that perspective, that business model, not a lot has changed because there's a lot of companies still popping up trying to solve that problem or giving that service. So I'm gonna derail a little bit on this part. If you had to reflect on your experience 25 years ago, .com era, and nowadays, like why hasn't it changed so much, or has it changed? Have people actually managed to solve that problem, or are we still stuck in a void?
No, I think there's a big difference. People do shop online a lot now, and you have many companies in Suriname who can deliver the stuff within 2 weeks in Suriname, and sometimes within a week. So I think the online shopping still works, and I think people can buy whatever they want, and sometimes even find a cheaper price than here in Suriname. Um, so it is a different business model at the moment, and still a lot is being shipped to Suriname. But I think that is changing also. For me, for instance, this vacation, I went on vacation without any suitcases, and I was with 5 people, and I saved money. Oh, this is the best experience ever. Not when you start traveling without suitcases, you cannot go back.
I mean, you don't have to wait in any line anymore. You
So
don't
when
have
we,
to go to baggage claim. I totally get what you, but tell
as
me
a
how, because I can't
as
do that. Sorry,
as
especially
as
if I'm away for longer than a week.
as a man, it's even better because the women don't carry the suitcases. Only the men carry the suitcases, right? So, and they're like, oh, it's no problem. We can take 5 suitcases, 6 suitcases, 7 suitcases. They don't carry it. They don't put it in the car. They don't do anything. So, this is something that I was working on for a long time, and it got me into a lot of fights because the children didn't understand it, and it's going to be even worse. I went on vacation with my ex-wife. We have done this for 3 times now. This was the last time though, and she didn't understand it either. But I saved around $400, not bringing suitcases, and I think it's even more if I take everything in account. But I saved around $400 for not bringing suitcases, and the most important stuff that we bought were in Suriname before we went to Suriname. So because I shipped them a week earlier with air freight, and the other stuff that I bought, those are things like towels and I don't know whatever. I did that with with just sea freight, and that was a week later in Suriname. Then I arrived.
Hacks. What do I say? It's
Okay,
a
hold on.
different perspective.
Hold on.
Okay, let me
Okay,
explain a little bit.
take me to the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, take us to the process
Okay.
of like, if you're going away for how long did you go? How
Went away for 3 weeks.
3
3 weeks.
weeks, 5 people, none
Okay,
of
Yeah.
them
3
suitcases.
weeks with only carry-on luggage, right?
Yeah, but
Carry-on, you did have carry-on,
you have
right?
you have carry on and you have one personal item, and one personal item can be a carry on bag, right?
A bag.
Yeah, and
Yeah, okay.
a lot fits in a bag. So you only have 10
Okay.
kilograms, but I think we had like around 15 kilograms that we used in those 2 items, and nobody complained about it. I could go on an internal flight to New York. That was no issue, and I flew. I fly. I
Oh, you flew?
I
Yeah, you
yeah, I
flew
flew
from?
indeed with Copa, and they didn't check that
Yeah.
either. So there was no issue concerning the weight and how much I brought along. So I had 5 tickets, and going with suitcases was around $50 per ticket extra. Um, so that saved me already 250 US dollar. Correct? I think it was a little bit more expensive. I think it was maybe $60. So let's say $300 that saved me. And then I also went to New York from Fort Lauderdale. And if you have an internal flight in America with a suitcase, you pay around $70 extra for a suitcase. So that also saved me around $350 to $400. So in total, about $700.
Per flight, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah. So for it was a single flight, right?
Yeah.
So, and then you have to have a bigger car, right? Because if you have five suitcases, you cannot have a small car. You have to have a bigger car to put all the suitcases in. And if you go to New York with all the small hotel rooms, five suitcases is going to be a hell. Getting a taxi for five suitcases is going to be a hell, and you're going to pay more. So if I take all that in consideration, I would even pay more for it. And with the shipping, if you do air freight from Miami, it's a week time. So what we did, we went to Orlando, stayed there for about 2 weeks, went to Miami for 3 days, and then went to New York for 5 days. And in Miami, I shipped everything. The first day I arrived there, I shipped the air freight and a shipping box. And at the third day, when we would leave to New York, I shipped the last box because my ex-wife was afraid that we would have too much weight. So, and everything came on time. It's a great way of traveling. And believe me, we came to Suriname, and the flight before us was the flight from Holland, from the KLM, and they were already full. So I looked at everybody, said bye, and I went out. We arrived at 3:45, and 4 o'clock I was outside.
I can attest to this. I recently had a similar flight where I was like, uh, I think it was Faranto and I went to Washington, and then we were booked differently, so we left on separate flights. And I came back without any checked luggage, and I was out of the airport before the business class.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's a
It's the best feeling
major.
ever. It's the
It's
best
it's
feeling
it's an
ever
amazing feeling. So,
because
but still doing that with air freight, sea freight, and shipping, that's next level though. I
no,
honestly,
but for
I've
if you
never
go
heard
to
of that before.
if you go to Holland, it's the same thing. If you send a box, it's almost cheaper than bringing the suitcase with you. So also from Holland, you cannot do it in every country. So Colombia would be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, I was about to say this is where there's infrastructure to
Where there's
easily ship.
infrastructure,
Yeah,
indeed, 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 indeed. Yes.
because
So
I think we're pretty similar in that regard. Once I learned how to travel with carry-on only, it's been like changed my conception of travel.
there's no way back, believe me. And when you have carried that many suitcases as I have, then you cannot go back, believe me.
I remember I was on a flight to Estonia for a conference. The going flight was all right, and I had my camera gear with me as well. So that's also some extra weight. And the returning flight to the Netherlands, it was kind of a full flight. So basically, the baggage was my backpack was a bit overweight, and they have some fitting, a case fitting. So I kind of forced it through it, and I looked at the lady very nicely, and like, yeah, it's fine. And then she said, okay, it's fine. So airlines generally their guidelines, but most of the times, if you're friendly enough, they'll let it slide because it's an average. It's an average, and if one or two people are a bit over, they usually won't really
Oh no,
make an issue of it.
oh no, that's
But I
actually
see Jean-Luc has a
what's the most you guys? What's the most you ever paid for having uh
overweight.
luggage over the overweight? Yeah, how much the most you've paid for
I
overweight
actually never
luggage?
paid overweight luggage.
Okay.
I paid for an extra suitcase, but that was a deliberate travel. I had to bring someone else's suitcase with me, but that's just it was paid for. It wasn't overweight.
I once paid 150 euros for overweight.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
The overweight luggage payment was more than the whole ticket, like was twice the cost of the whole ticket. But I was studying in Helsinki and I had to bring stuff back to I think I flew either to Brussels. I think I flew to Brussels. And I had to take everything that I owned in Helsinki with me. And I didn't know the infrastructure of putting everything in a box. So I tried to cram it along. I tried every trick because I paid for like, and that was also the crazy thing. You paid like 30 or 40 euros per kilogram overweight. So, but I already had like about 15 kilos in my winter coat. So there was like no more space. I was like, okay, these final. And then I even gave people things like, hey, keep them for me in Helsinki. I'll see how they'll get there. And still ended up paying for like 5 kilos or something. And I was like, yeah. And the worst part is, it was a flight from Helsinki to Latvia. I think it was Riga. I'm not sure. And then from Latvia to either the Netherlands or Belgium. So I had to play the overflight twice.
Yeah, but that's the thing with this with the suitcase, because they weigh the suitcase, but with hand luggage they hardly weigh it. Only when there's an issue like what Diego is telling you.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a great experience. The children were happy. They bought soccer shoes and they were already here when they arrived, so they were ecstatic.
Yeah,
So
I can imagine. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
So transitioning from that experience, like always finding like different ways and smart ways to think about things, to translate it to a business perspective.
Hmm.
Like you went and studied ICT, and then you also there realized that not everything that you see on a piece of paper is actually what you think it's supposed to be. Um, I also want to throw in a little other perspective. I know your family as like a family that supplied a lot of companies in Suriname with top line management. Like it's a managerial kind of family, with a few exceptions like yourself that became entrepreneurs. So, how was that journey from going to study, finding out the direction that you wanted to go, and ending up becoming an entrepreneur?
Oh, I think it was mainly coincidence. Well, I've always been entrepreneurial when I was younger. When I was like really young, I tried to rent out Nintendo games. Um, one of the thing I started
That's
when I was,
interesting.
yeah, when I was a student, I started doing Farah Lobby, and after that we opened an e-commerce site for selling T-shirts, skate stuff and T-shirts, which became quite successful. But we never could make it really profitable for all the stakeholders. Um, and I always had my own company while I was working. So with my own company, I also made websites for other people, and then yeah, I think I always had that experience. So when I was 27, I came to Suriname because I studied in Holland. I lived in two countries. Maybe I should tell that first. 0 to 5 in Suriname. Then my dad went and started working in Holland, and we stayed there for 6 years. Then I came back, was at 12, and then from 12 to 18, I went to the Netherlands, and then from 18 to 27, I lived in the Netherlands, and I worked around 3 years in Holland. And working 3 years in Holland gives you an advantage of 10 years in Suriname. And I still believe that's the case. The experience that you get there, the way the big companies operate, but also dealing um, and the skills that you learn because they invest a lot in their people gives you an advantage for almost the coming 10 years. And then in Suriname, I came with a job for Telesur. I had the opportunity to build their intranet for the first time. And then when I came to Suriname, I was allowed to make their website. And it was the first website in Suriname where you could see the bills online. It was never done before. And that was my first case. And after building that website, I got a job offered by Telesur, and I didn't take it. I started working on my own, mainly because my dad told me that would be a good idea also. But also working for a company again, especially company as Telesur, where there are a lot of political issues. I didn't see that working for me. So I started my own company, and one of the advice of my dad, yeah, I went in business with two other partners, and he told me what was going to happen. And It did after 10 years. After 1 year and after 10 years, exactly that happened what he said. But the experience was really good for my journey as a person.
So I wanna see if I can make a connection here. So you mentioned 3 years in Netherlands would be equivalent to 10 years of experience here, right? So it's basically a fast track in experience, in learning things. And when you talked about your example of what you have planned for your son, letting him travel for a year there, is that parallel that you're drawing there for that experience as well? Not just for um, prospecting or getting some orientation, but also getting that hands-on real life, I'd say,
Yeah,
experience.
especially for Surinamese children. We don't do a good job as a parent here in Suriname. We do too much for our children. Uh, we bring them to school. We help them with their homework. We do all the things that needs to be arranged. So they have no opportunity. We don't give them an allowance mostly. We give them money when they need it. There's no way for them to learn. They are not allowed to even walk in a street or to bike around. It's not a good thing to raise your children like that. So when you go abroad, the world is different. Here you know everybody, there you know nobody. Here you are somebody, there you are the bottom of the society, and you are a number. It's such a culture shock when you go abroad, and then to have a study, which is really expensive for most parents. It's normal that you fail the first year and maybe the second year. Only a few children do it in 4 years that they finish their study. So for me, for them to experience what it is to take the metro, to take an airplane on their own, to arrange their passport for the first time, to get an idea, to find a house, to start asking people things. When my dad wants when my son wants something, he asks me to call. I'm like, I'm not going to call for you. You have to call on your own. They need to be taught that. And when they're there, there's nobody to help them, so they have to do it on their own. And I think in that, only in the first year just being abroad, you already have so much more than when a child stays here in Suriname and stays living with their parents, for instance. So only that experience already gives you a 3 year experience ahead of children here in Suriname who are still living in Suriname. And when you start working in the Netherlands or in a different country, you start learning what a deadline is. You start learning not to make excuses. You have to do your job well. If you don't do that, then you get fired. You learn it quite easy. There's no daddy who can call for you and solve your problem. And so I truly believe that I tell everybody to come back to Suriname, but I tell them at least to work 3 years abroad, and that experience that you learn in those 3 years gives you an advantage for I think 10 years, but maybe for your lifetime here in Suriname.
And the other thing I wanted to bring back is you also mentioned previously that I'd say education in a traditional sense is overrated. And seeing your trajectory from, starting your own business, rejecting the offer you got from Telesur, and coming from as Jean-Luc mentioned, a managerial family, how would you, if you had to lay it out in the context of education or the tradition in the traditional sense being overrated, if you're looking at managers and entrepreneurs, business owners, where's that overratedness of the traditional education system?
Maybe I should start a little bit different. If I look at my children, before they started school, um, they were very happy. They were really self-assured. Um, and then they went to school and they started seeing for the first time that something was difficult and they couldn't solve it. Um, Especially now, where I think a lot of children are on social media, YouTube. the gratification is totally different. So to get to keep the interest of a child is now a few seconds, and if they don't like something, they swipe it and they go on to the next movie or the next picture or the next story or anything. So if you look at the schools where you have one subject for 2 hours in a row, I mean, how is it possible that a teacher can get the attention of 20 children who are used to scrolling around and getting a dopamine hit every time they see something interesting? You cannot compete with that. So you need to change it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is what we are taught now in school is I was looking for the word in
It's
English. I
totally
don't
outdated, I think.
outdated. Yes, achterhaald,
Yeah.
outdated. Yeah. So if you see how the technology revolution is proceeding and what we are doing with AI now, to learn something out from your head and um, to be rewarded for that is silly. What we need to learn is the information that I'm getting, is it good information or is it bad information? How do I work with social media? Those are the things that should be teaching the children. We shouldn't be teaching them to know something from their head and get a 6 or a 7 if they know everything from their head. Now we have our phone. In our phone is everything, all the information that you need. Probably within 20 years, you'll have a chip in your head and everything is in your head. You don't need to know languages. You don't need to know. You probably don't need to write anymore because then you will be able to do everything on voice command. So many of the skills that we are taught now are going to be obsolete probably in 20 years time, and also with a lot of jobs. So if you're going to choose a study at this moment, what the hell are you going to study? And with that in mind also, people study 4 years. So for instance, if my son would want to do ICT, I would advise him not to take a study. If he goes to study ICT, he will do 4 years over the study. If in the best case scenario. So in a worst case scenario, he will take about 5 years for it. If he wants to do a master afterwards, it will take him another 2 years. So he would be busy studying 7 years. Now he has paid around $100,000 maybe euro for their whole education, maybe even more. And if your dad is rich and he can pay it, that's great. But for some children, they take a loan and they have a big loan deficit. Um, and after 7 years, they cannot do anything. So if they start working at the company, they cannot do anything. They are still a junior. So if you take those 7 years away and you took those 7 years and you started working practically, you start learning online, you go and work somewhere for free for just a year or two, you would learn much more and you would be at a much more higher rate than somebody who has done the 7 year study. So for ICT, for instance, I don't think it's a good idea to do that. But if you want to become a lawyer where you need a degree to practice law, or you want to become an engineer where you need a degree to make a construction or things like that, then it's a different case. But for sure, so for some studies, I think learning online or learning by real practices is a much faster route to learn the skill set that you need to learn.
There are some points that I definitely agree with you. There are some other things that I think that we haven't quite figured out the true purpose of certain educational programs. So I do agree to some extent that languages, I mean, you have Duolingo now, where you can basically learn a language much easier or even better than you could do it in a classroom, for instance, right? But then you get to other parts of degrees and what it means to get a degree. For me personally, like a bachelor degree or a master's degree isn't necessarily like the skill or the knowledge that you obtain specifically regarding the topics, but has much more to do with analytical thinking. Like, how do you process your thought process to think intellectually, much more than what the topics is specifically about. And I do feel even if you look at basic education, the same can be said for math, The same can be said for language. Like it's when we talk about, yeah, we should learn Dutch or should learn English. Like yes, on a day to day, like in business, it won't really matter unless you have to be able to communicate professionally, right? And and the reason I'm in a bit of a dilemma is because that's also what I traditionally done. And now I have a, I don't think he's even a gents here, but I have somebody in my team that we have a rule, by the way, that every week we have our weekly meeting and somebody else is taking notes. So if we're a team of 15 people, 3 times a year, um, you'll be taking notes. And now we have somebody in our team that just pays off his colleagues like, hey, it's my turn. Do you wanna take notes for me? Yeah, sure, I'll pay you. How much? Yeah, fine, I'll just pay it.
I
And
love this
like,
guy.
hold on, wait, like wait a minute. This is not how it's supposed to be. But he has already acknowledged, like, listen, my attention span is 8 seconds. So when you tell your company news, I won't be able to process that in my head alone. So writing it down is definitely not gonna happen. I'm not gonna obtain that skill anytime soon. I'm not interested in obtaining that skill. So listen, I'll just pay. And then you get to the educational part where on one side you need to have like basics, like these are basic skills that you will need in life. And then you get to choose, which is already kind of in the US educational system. But here's where it gets difficult: guidance. And we all know it's much more difficult to guide 20 to 30 students than it is to get a textbook and ram it in. So I'm a little I to certain points I completely agree, but on the other side, I think like
So
the narrative not to do the school system because it's being abused.
so let me elaborate a little bit on that. So you said the guy knows he doesn't he's not well in a certain skill, and
Yeah.
he solves the problem, and you're thinking
Yeah.
that's not fair. But isn't the guy really smart to do that? So for instance, I have a guy here also. He doesn't like to communicate with customers, so I do it for him. But he's like the best programmer that we have. The what he does in 1 hour programming, nobody else does in our company. So if I take that 1 hour of him talking to the customer, which should actually be his job to do, uh, he's much more happy. I don't mind doing it, and he's much more productive. So what's wrong with it? So
So
I
the
don't.
thing there are two things that are wrong with it. Like if you do that approach, which I think we're all three of us have been doing to a certain extent, you get like certain deficits. Like you get these small task clusters that you just have nobody that's able to do it in the company. And so that's the first concern. And then the second concern that I actually have is um, at a certain point, if you get way too advanced, and I really want to know your take on this, if you go too advanced with your existing team, it becomes an in crowd, and whoever comes in, no matter how skillful they are, no matter how good they are, they're just not able to fit in anymore because you have something tailor made, which has been going on for like 5+ years. And anybody that comes in from the outside, it takes them too much time to learn to adapt to that situation that they feel out as an outsider, regardless.
Yeah, that takes time. We have been having difficulties adding new members to our team also, and this is one of the main reasons. We have in our company a really free approach of the way we operate. Things like you don't need to be on time. You can work whenever you want. You can work from home. You can take a day off anytime you want. And not everybody, and especially younger people, they have a lot of problems with it because when you are young, you need to learn a lot, and the only way to learn a lot is to do the thing that you need to do many times. And if you don't put in that effort, you won't be very well in the subject that you are trying to learn. Um, And when you give a young person a lot of freedom in the beginning, it's sometimes difficult to achieve what he needs to achieve to fit in the team, and that is a big issue. We try to solve that with talking a lot with the person, but also that is sometimes difficult in Suriname because people don't like it when you're direct. We are often quite direct and often very quickly direct to the person, and that is something that they need to learn to cope with because they're not used to it. That somebody tells them their deficits or somebody tells them things to inspire them. That's quite difficult, to be honest, and that's also one of the main issues that we have with expanding our team. I do have to agree with that. Um, but I'm still hopeful that it will be solved. We have a new guy now, and I'm talking a lot with him, and I'm explaining him certain things, and he's open for it. And as long as you're open and you're willing to work hard to learn your skill set, then you will succeed anywhere. And it's also the thing that I've noticed with people who don't finish their study or haven't studied. They often have a chip on their shoulder and they want to prove themselves, and then they do much more effort than somebody who has already finished their study. And that is something that you can use. That kind of uncertainty can be a good motivator for somebody to achieve to achieve more. So when we hire, for instance, we don't look at what have you done or what have you studied. We look at what do you want to learn and why do you want to learn it, and can we help you with that? And what we also do is that I'm thinking of the Dutch the Dutch speech, but I'm not sure how you say it in English. But we throw you in the deep end, and then we see if you can swim or not. And
So,
some people drown, and some people they make it. And if they make it, man, they are the best people that you can have.
yeah, it's basically a kind of a hero's journey. But correct me if I'm wrong. Is it Ricardo Semler, uh, the method you often mention?
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, maybe you can explain it in short. But that's one of the things you apply in your company, right? And it's a very non-conventional way of running a company,
Yeah.
especially here.
You can.
And how do you see that in relation to what you just discussed with Jean-Luc in hiring or adopting new talent into that culture
So
or into that system?
it's real funny. Ricardo Semler started this way of operating in the years 80. So you imagine 45 years ago, he started this way of thinking. And it is actually that they don't have any rules in the company. That is basically the summary of their company. Um, you can um, you can come whenever you want, of how late you want. You can take your holidays. Um, you can decide your own salary. Uh, there are many things there which are not conventional, especially not in Brazil, and especially not in the 80 years. And those times were years with hyperinflation in Brazil. So for him to succeed was really difficult also in that time. But they have that way of thinking has made different things. So it was a great example that he explained. For instance, it was more economic to buy parts in bulk. So they make things like microwaves and things like that. Those kind of products that are made at Semco. And it was cheaper to buy things in bulk, so they bought a lot of things. But when they made a new product, then some of the items that they have, they weren't used anymore. So even though they paid less for it, they now had a lot of items that they couldn't use anymore. So one of the things that the people on the floor said, I want to have my stock right in front of me. So they put baskets with all the parts, and as soon as they see that the parts were almost finished, they started reordering. And when the product line was finished, they made a new product, so then they didn't have a lot of stock left. So that saved them a lot of money. But if you are a manager, you don't look at that aspect because you're not working on the floor. you only work at, oh, I can save 10% by buying 100 instead of 50. But actually, if you only use 50 and you throw away another 50, then you've lost 50%. And I think that was the main difference there. Also, he changed the hierarchy. So in a lot of traditional companies, you have a real hierarchy with a lot of layers. He brought it back to 3 layers. It was the RVC, managers, and then the employees. And another thing that he changed is that employees evaluated the managers, and not the managers were evaluating the employees. So that's also a way of thinking which was really, really strange, especially in that time. And one of the things that they did, especially talking about how do you integrate new people. Sometimes people left Semco because they thought they could get a better offer, or they wanted a different experience. And every time when they had a position open and somebody who already worked for Semco was applying for the job, they were hired first because they already knew the culture and they already knew how everything worked at Semco, and they knew that working outside of Semco is a horrible experience. So when they came back, they were there for life, and that was just a rule that they had in their company. So we are experiencing this also a little bit. It's really difficult to sometimes get new people because the freedom is often too daunting for them, and especially if you're a junior, it's difficult to see the benefits of working a little bit harder in the beginning than taking all of the freedom in the beginning. I hope that answers your question, Diego.
Yeah, it did a bit, but yeah, the challenge is still there. I would say with that integrating into that system, as you mentioned, everyone wants freedom, but not everyone knows how to deal with freedom.
Yeah, that's true. And the funny part is when somebody when we are the first job that they ever had, they think this is the normal way of doing a job. So when they go to a different company, they're like, what the hell is this? So
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 have
Diego,
you gotten
when
that
I
they come back to you?
yeah, so we had an office manager, and she reached a certain point within the company, and I told her, hey, you're welcome to stay as long as you want, but for you to get a higher salary, it's going to be difficult because you don't bring in any money. You cost us money. Um, so I told her, for her to advance in her career, because she was doing accounting also, I told her, go out and work somewhere else. And she did. She went and worked at a different company, and she was complaining a lot. She was not used to the way things operated. Everything was much more difficult. She was paid the same amount as she was paid at our company. But the devaluation of the SRD, it became much less than what she was earning here. And we have our salary in dollars, so when the money devaluates, you still get the same amount of money. So that was really difficult for her. And I told her, why don't you start on your own? And she has done that after 2 years of working with the other company, and she's making 6 times more than she was making with us and with another company, just being on her own and trying and doing it. And she has her own rules. She doesn't have a boss who tells her what to do or not to do. So I do believe that for many people who are complaining about their job or about what they are earning, it's in certain much easier to start on your own and earn more than you have when you are getting a salary somewhere else. And that's also one of the most challenging things for us as a company. I think in the last years, we have lost around 3 to 4 people who went to Holland, and we cannot compete with that. I mean, they get a much better salary there. They can buy a house. In Suriname, it's so difficult to buy a house with your salary. They can go on vacation. With us, we sometimes go on a company holiday with the whole company. But for them to go on their own, it takes them 2 to 3 years to save enough money to go on vacation. So yeah, it's difficult.
Diego, I have so many directions we could dive into, but I do think we should do overrated, underrated.
Well, we already know one thing that's overrated for Raul.
Yeah,
So
the traditional educational system. No, just kidding, just kidding. So,
Okay.
Raul, this segment of the show is basically to close it off in a fun way. We'll do a little overrated, underrated. We'll drop something for you. You tell us whether or not it's overrated or underrated. You are allowed to elaborate, but you're not obliged to.
Okay.
So, I'm going to start with a really easy one. WordPress.
Oh, underrated.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There's so much
We talked about
possibilities in WordPress. So I have to tell one funny story. So we have two content management systems in our company. One is Umbraco, and it's what we've been taught through the years. And we have really people who are, they are Umbraco is their guru. It's their way of life. It's. And one of them started learning WordPress, and this I cannot do this in Umbraco. I cannot do this in Umbraco. I cannot do this in Umbraco. So no, I think underrated. Underrated. Yeah, because it's so
okay.
easy.
We talked about no suitcases traveling abroad. The interior of Suriname, overrated or underrated?
I'm the wrong person to ask. If there is not an airport, it's not a holiday for me. Uh,
That's a really interesting quote.
oh, let's say
But there
underrated.
are resorts now in the interior that have air conditioning and
True,
hot water.
true.
So
That's what
it's
I.
getting better for you.
I like luxury when I go on holiday. But I do have to say, if I have to choose to go to the interior, and that's probably because I'm spoiled, I'm not sure, or to go abroad, I often choose to go abroad.
Okay, fair enough. Next one. Confidential information, confidential company information.
Yeah, overrated. Should I elaborate?
Go ahead. You don't have to, but go ahead. Since you're already put
So
your chair up and
for
was
certain businesses, it's really important. For instance, for AI, if you have that out, how the model is built, then that's going to be a big problem, of course. But for me, I'm really open with everything that I do within the company and also all the information that we have, because if the people around me get better, that stimulates me to get better, and I like that competition. So for me, I think confidential information is overrated.
Okay, then I have to close it off. I'd say an entrepreneurial one. The ability to do an elevator pitch, overrated or underrated?
An elevator pitch. Hmm. Good question. I think underrated. I think that is enough to get a good idea, especially if you have some experience with um, recognizing how people are. Uh, I think it's underrated. I think you can learn a lot in an elevator pitch.
so.
Awesome.
As we close off, we like to ask our guests what they
We're
are
already
working
done.
on.
Damn.
Yeah, yeah, it's already an hour. Yeah,
Damn.
so
I have the feeling I haven't said anything yet.
Well, there's a lot more to be said. We
yeah.
can go another
Yeah.
hour.
So, so
Yeah.
maybe we can take three talking points that you feel like, hey, if I would follow Raul in the next year, these are things that I might get to see or learn more about.
Uh, I do have to say that sharing for me is difficult to do, but I like to do it because if somebody asks me something, I'm really happy to give them my experiences. But I'm not somebody who goes on social media a lot and posts enough stuff. So for me, talking at the social media conference, the reason I chose, and I'm glad that you gave the opportunity, Jean-Luc, to talk there, is that a year ago I did the same pitch at the Health Wealth seminar, and there were not a lot of people, and I got really good feedback from it, and people said you have to share your story a little bit more. So I wrote some of my stories on LinkedIn, but at the moment nobody even reads, so only a few people read it, and that's why I wanted to do a presentation and tell more about my business and the way I found my happiness. And because it's like religion. So if you believe in something, you want everybody to believe the same thing or to share that experience that you are experiencing. And that's what I have. So when young entrepreneurs come and I can share with them, I love doing that. Or when somebody's interested in a topic, I love telling them about my story and why I did certain choices. And I also want to convince people that not to compete with others for your own recognition. Uh, and I think many people live their life that way. And that, yeah, that is something that, because I do believe if you don't do that, then you will be much happier if you set your own boundaries and live by those, by them.
I think that's a good place to end this. We could definitely do another follow up, but we're gonna hear more tomorrow at the session that Raul is gonna have at a social media conference. So
Yeah,
if you're at the conference tomorrow, join in. I'm not sure if there's a sign up procedure, but I'm looking forward to that session as well, and we're looking more forward to learning more about Raul. Shanluk, any closing thoughts?
Yes, with this, we want to thank you, Raul, for joining us for Social Confoes. Diego, it has been a pleasure. And as always, see you back next week. Same place, same time. Bye bye.
thank you guys. Thank you for the opportunity.